Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Back, first video of January. And I guess we must have been about our 4th or 5th year doing this, Joe.
At least, I think. Well, and about our 20th year of doing it off screen.
Absolutely. So, yeah, just John and I getting together and sharing music, listening to music and talking about it, and then sharing it with you. And I have to say, brand new stylus has appeared today on the Technics deck, and it is the MP110 from Nagaoka, which is making an amazing difference to the sound.
Best sound yet.
Best sound yet. And the first album we listened to, definitely one of my favourite albums of 2019, which is Floating Points, which is basically a guy called Sam Shepard, and his first release for, I think this is for Warp actually, called Crush. And yeah, we listened to the first track on side one, which was just called Falaise, and featured a whole load of string players being sort of manipulated through sound, and then kind of went into a real sort of techno, almost drum and bass kind of vibe. But yeah, really like Floating Points. Highly recommended.
There's a kind of little bit of a Detroit kind of techno feel in there, kind of gentle version of it, and made me think of the Inner Zone Orchestra, which came out in quite a long time ago now, back in 2000, I think, 1999, which is I was going to say Craig Charles. I don't know.
And it's Stolen Function.
Absolutely.
Craig David.
Carl Craig.
Okay.
Do you want Carl Craig?
Oh, Craig David on New Year's Day. New Year's Eve was absolutely appalling.
I can imagine.
Anyway,
I can imagine. Anyway,
yeah.
So this came out on. This was basically a project of Carl Craig as opposed to Craig Charles, and this was basically enhancing his kind of his DJ style with a lot of live musicians as well, like Craig Taborn, another Craig in there as well, and the Inner Zone Orchestra, and they did a single called Bug in the Bass Bin, which was a very big track around that same time as well. And we listened to the track called, I can't remember what it was called actually, to the track called Timing off there as well. This was a 6 EP edition which came out on Talking Loud. I always remember when I bought it, Mark accused me of being a fashion victim for buying the vinyl back in the day. Now look what happens. So.
Yeah, but I should also point out we did listen to it at the wrong speed.
We did for quite a good time. Actually,
and it sounded quite good.
Sounded fine. Very big gated drums.
This is a very recent acquisition. Something that, yeah, I wasn't aware had been re-released. This is Kimiko Kasai, basically with the Headhunters. And anybody who watched the last video may remember that I was showing the Direct Step Herbie Hancock album. I think very much from a similar session with the same lineup, which featured Webster Lewis and Ray Obiedo, in addition to Alphonse Mouzon, Bill Summers, Bernie Maupin, and of course Paul Jackson on the bass. This is, I mean, you know, anything with Paul Jackson on I'm going to be wanting to listen to and buy, and of course Herbie as well. It does sound a little bit like a very high-end hotel lobby music that's quite sort of funky and disco-y, and I think that's mainly down to the vocals of Kimiko Kasai, who I don't know, is interesting. But anyway, there's a great version of Butterfly, and we actually listened to a different track, which I think was it Sunlight?
I think it was Sunlight, yeah.
Yeah, Sunlight, which had some fantastic sax playing from Benny Maupin. But yeah, a great pressing actually. Sounds really good.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I remember after I bought that record, I think not that long after it came out actually, I also bought an album with her and Gil Evans, which should have been fantastic, which was absolutely awful. So I think, you know, look at with some care. I think this is something I might have already shown or played, I think, sometime or other on the VC, but it was good to put it out again. This is Double Rainbow by Terumasu Hino, with a lot of input from Masabumi Kikuchi, who's one of my favourite kind of Japanese artists, and played the track Merry-Go-Round, which is from 1980, so it's slightly kind of late period. It's before he got into some quite kind of Bob James-ish kind of fusion stuff later on. But this one's very Miles-ish.
Very
sounding
Miles-ish.
track.
Yeah,
with,
yeah.
Anthony Jackson and
sounded amazing.
Harvey
Drummers and
so some really great. But there's 3 percussionists on most tracks on this, and they're really used well actually. But this is a really solid album all the way through. This one, highly recommended.
Well, I followed that up. Oh, I think I did follow it up with Willy Bobo actually. Is that right?
Yes, I think you might have done, yeah.
And the reason being that... Oh, no, I didn't. I followed it up with Miles. I followed it up with Miles himself. This is the... some very fancy...
MFSL.
The MFSL. Reissue of Bitches Brew, which, as I was saying to John, was an album that I bought...
You were 11.
When I was 11. And I watched over the Christmas period the Miles movie with Don Cheadle. What's it called? Miles Away?
Miles, something, yeah.
Something like that. Which was very much around, kind of based on Miles just coming out of his Electric period. And I think I'd read an interview in a Melody Maker annual from 1970, which had kind of got me really intrigued by Miles and the Bitches Brew album, and so bought it when I was 11. And it sort of had quite a profound effect. And I'm still trying to work out what I was listening to. But we listened to the track John McLaughlin, and it sounded fantastic.
I thought I was precocious buying John Coltrane when I was 18. I think I've just been beaten there. This is one of my very few purchases since we last did a session, actually. This is Stone Alliance. I had a kind of dodgy Provenance kind of CD version of this. This is a band with Gene Perler on bass, Don Elias on congas, who of course is on Bitches Brew as well, and was on the previous record, and Steve Grossman on tenor saxophone. Steve Grossman played with Miles, but always played soprano with Miles, but he's a great tenor player. And this is a raw album, Stone Alliance, kind of fairly legendary kind of sound to it. Very, very raw and very kind of, kind of unlike quite a lot of other music around at the same time, actually. There's definitely not an element of... So it's kind of fusion album, but it really isn't at the same time as well. Lots of percussion, lots of... but yeah, good. This and Steve Grossman's solo albums are really, really good.
Lots of space.
Yeah, and this was a reissue on Light in the Attic, which came out a few years ago.
Really nice.
Very
really
nice.
Great.
Yeah.
And I noted that Gene Perler was cited as being a percussionist with Willy Bobo. So although Willy Bobo doesn't...
Don Alliance was it?
Was it Don Alliance?
Yeah. Gene Perler was a bass player.
I think it was...
Well, really?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe
Gene
he played...
Perler.
Maybe, yeah.
And obviously, as a percussive heavy album, we moved across to another percussionist, Willy Bobo, and listened to his amazing version of the Ronnie Law's Always There track, which is amazing apart from a very dodgy middle eight, which I think maybe is just deliberately there so that you really you get excited when the main groove comes back in. This is Wayne Henderson produced. It sounded great, full of percussion.
Wayne was busy. He produced a lot of stuff around that time. So thinking of drummers and percussionists, then moved on to Billy Hart. And this is an album called Enchants, which was on the A&M Horizon label. Great series of records around in the late 70s. Really nicely produced, good kind of liner notes, kind of, and it's great to hear music like this getting a really good kind of treatment, really. And played the track, there's a whole array of fantastic musicians on this record, but played the track Shadow Dance, which features Billy Hart on drums, of course, Oliver Lake, Dewey Redman, Hannibal Marvin Pedersen, Don Pullen, who does a great piano solo, and Dave Holland, who wrote the track, who plays beautifully through the whole thing as well. This is a very highly recommended record, one of the best of that late 70s kind of, where you got kind of free bop, I guess, merging with free jazz a bit as well, but really nice record.
Well, we had a bit of a left turn, and some Joe Walsh appeared, I think, as a session first. Now, I remember watching Joe Walsh, and John remembers this as well, on a show called The Old Grey Whistle Test, which was our sort of alternative music place where you kind of saw the musicians you were listening to on the BBC. And I always remember being fascinated by the sound of Joe Walsh's guitar, particularly on this track, Country Fair, which has a great sort of crunchy phase sound to it. And actually, it's a great tune. It's a really great tune. It's got quite a sort of psychedelic feel with some really nice reverse guitar happening in the middle, and a great sort of minimal drum break as well, which I'd be surprised if it hasn't been sampled yet. But yeah, Joe Walsh.
Yeah, I'll Go Whistle Test was an amazing show, actually. We had legendary sessions, people like the Wailers and all that kind of stuff as well. And so keeping in that kind of rock 70s kind of mode, really. I don't know if anybody like me enjoyed Watchmen, the series on HBO, but it's a fantastic series of based on the Alan Moore, wasn't it? A graphic novel and comic. The closing scene of this was an amazing use of Spooky Tooth's I Am the Walrus, their version of the Beatles classic. And if you haven't seen it, see it. But also, it's such a heavy tune, this one.
Really?
Absolutely really heavy.
Yeah.
And the final scene is kind of spine-chilling, really. And anyway, great TV series, but also a great record. Spooky Tooth's I Am the Walrus.
Brilliant. Now, something that's been reissued, and it was actually John who turned me on to this album, which I now know is also a bit of a VC classic. I don't know if anyone's shown the reissue of Gene Clark's No Other, which has just come out a couple of months ago, with a delightful poster of Gene in his full flowing garb here.
Yeah.
But this was an album that cost an awful lot of money and did absolutely nothing at the time, but has since kind of just gathered momentum as being regarded as a complete classic album. And we listened to the track From a Silver File, and the incredible lush production, orchestral stuff, some amazing players on this, some great tunes, and all in all a fantastic press as well. If anybody who doesn't have this, I highly recommend getting hold of No Other.
So then we moved from Gene Clark to Neil Young, and this was a kind of later but very underrated Neil Young records, Silver and Gold. Played the track Razor Love off here, and I remember Bernie Grundman saying he thought this was one of the best things they'd ever mastered at his mastering studio as well. Kind of very nice, actually it looks great with the distance with all the you can see the photographs on the front of it. So anyway, so played the track Razor Love, which is a typical kind of Neil Young ballad really off here. But lovely sounding record.
Oh God, it was absolutely sensational. Yeah. At this stage, we were getting extremely excited.
Also,
by the
very
sound
easy
of
to
the
find
cartridge.
and still available on. I mean, Neil Young always, one credit, he always put his stuff out on vinyl right through his whole career, and this is still available.
Next up was a 10-inch by the Metrotones Inc. And this is a 2-track 10-inch released on the Honest John label, and a bit of, sort of gospel soul, called Get Together, which felt a very sort of important message for the times we're in. Get Together.
So I think, kind of playing with the message vibe a little bit, actually thought of The Prisoner of Gil Scott-Heron's classic record, Pieces of a Man. I mean, this album almost suffers by every track being incredible on it, really. And it's quite hard to get through to the second side sometimes. But The Prisoner's a long track at the end of the second side of this track, with very, very some great bass playing as well from Ron Carter on there, really restrained. But this is a classic. This is a reissue that came out on BGP, which was very cheap, and this was the last time there was a vinyl revival a few years ago. Just obviously a classic Gil Scott-Heron, probably his best record actually.
And some lovely piano playing from
Great
Brian
piano
Jackson
playing as well. Yeah.
Well,
Another good message in there as well.
Yeah. I discovered a vegan record shop sort of between New Cross and Deptford, which it sort of sells vegan food and has a record shop attached. And we listened to the track Bid 'Em In
Amazing
from
track.
Oscar Brown Jr., which if you've never heard it, it kind of says an awful lot about the state of race relations in America and slavery.
It's basically a slave market, isn't it?
It is a slave market, yeah.
It's an unbelievable track.
It's kind of a really shocking, arresting tune, which I wasn't familiar with. There's also Dat There, which is a classic tune on here. Oscar Brown Jr., Sin and Soul. This is on the Philips label, UK release.
So keeping in a soulful vein, this is an album I think that's either has been or just about to be re-released in some kind of chiffon and gold leaf edition or something else. This is an original on Cotillion, which was a subset of Atlantic recording, and Lou Johnson, who was a Southern soul singer who made a transition into the 70s, not terribly successfully actually, as a kind of more modern soul singer. But this is his album, Sweet Southern Soul, and played the track People in Love, which is written by Eddie Hinton, who's a bit of a favourite of mine as a writer. But classic Muscle Shoals sound, actually, absolute classic. I mean, you barely have to hear 3 notes to realise where it was recorded. But some great deep soul. We don't play a lot of deep soul.
No.
But it's a good.
But we should make a big shout out to Lawrence, Mr. Mellow Man, who is playing a lot of deep soul.
Yes, that's true.
And sharing it. And also John, the 6-inch pianist, who enjoying videos from both of them.
And your guy who was singing. Who was
And
that?
the guy who was singing, whose name has a completely... I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, Benny King. We listened to, on the Atlantic label, the 12-inch... Well, I don't know if it's a 12-inch version, but a version of Spoilt, which also has Street Tough on the B-side, and just classic Benny King. What a great vocalist, what a great tune. Kind of rare groove classic.
Absolutely. So from one great singer to another one. And got out Lou. This is kind of such
my
a...
God, this could have been the highlight of the
Yeah,
whole
it
session.
sounded amazing, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a record that certainly I know, and I know Martin knows so well. It's kind of part of our kind of life, really. But you don't often sit down and listen to records like this again. But we played the track Better Love of this album. This was a strange UK version of which it was released in the UK, combined the first 2 albums with a 7-inch single inside it, basically, which meant you had the first his two albums when it came out. After then, they were released separately. But anyway, that sounded amazing, actually. I saw Luther around this time, and I have to say it's one of my top 10 ever concerts. I think absolutely incredible. Great singer,
And just incredible production.
amazing production.
Yeah, do have a listen to that. Right, we'll follow that up with something which also I actually find spine-tinglingly incredible, which is the version of Joy in Repetition off Graffiti Bridge. I've listened to it about 4 times recently, and every time it gives me goosebumps. Both the feel of the tune, but also the intensity of Prince's solo on this. It's just played with such intent.
And in fact, it's quite low in the mix, makes it even more intense.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the album is a little bit hit and miss.
It's a good time track on it.
Yeah. But yeah, fantastic, and not expensive to get this album.
Absolutely, and we're moving into slight classic country now, but also went for something else that I sat down and listened to, hadn't done for quite a long time, was listen to Talking Book again, and it just sounded amazing. Really. And played Looking for Another Pure Love, which has, of course, Jeff Beck and Buzzy Feiten and people. But you just forget how great some of these albums are, actually, and this was a part of a whole run of absolute classics.
Yeah, and it was the sort of the low end of that synth bass on there is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so revolutionary from a sonic perspective. I think what Stevie was doing.
Well,
at
he's
that time.
also one of my favourite drummers for somebody who's not a drummer.
Yeah.
I love his drumming style.
Yeah. Touched in with a little bit of reggae and a 12-inch by Carlton and the Shoes on the Yvonne Special label, which was Dennis Brown's wife's label, and a track called Forever and Always, which was Carlton and the Shoes, who were a big band in the 60s, but this was a 1980s offering, or late 70s. Just very sort of ethereal, cerebral harmonies with a tough kind of, I don't know if it's Roots Radix, but it's that kind of vibe on the backing track.
I think we've got out of sync actually somehow or other. Don't quite understand what's happened.
No, I think we're
Oh,
good.
no?
John.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
no. So I thought Lumpy Gravy was before that, I think.
No.
Never mind. Anyway, stuck with them. We have got out of sync.
We have got out of sync.
But
Sorry, folks.
there was a whole period when reggae got massive in the UK, and really
Yeah.
big, and probably almost the biggest crossover, apart from Bob Marley, of course, was Black Uhuru, which was this was their the 4th album, but the second big one on Island Records, on Mango Records in Ireland.
Before Red, wasn't
Before Red, yeah, and played the track Happiness, and again massive, huge Sly and Robbie rhythms on here. Absolutely no attempt to try and make them sound kind of not electronic, absolutely hammering it out. And they did a lot of huge concerts in the UK. And Mark and I have always found that we were at the same concerts, not even knowing each other actually. But they did a legendary and kind of slightly sad concert at the Rainbow where somebody was stabbed, killed. But it was heavy duty times actually. But yeah, great band actually.
Last session I played a track called Time Is Right, of a compilation called Time Is Right by the band MCB. And I remember we were saying could never find where the original album had come from, and amazingly I picked it up. I think I picked it up on Amazon or something, very cheap, and it's actually worth quite a lot of money. Very much in the like kind of cross between Aleem and Cameo, I would say. Basically, MCB seems to be two guys, Aaron Mills, who's a bass player, and Gerald Bright, who's a trombonist and a lead vocalist. But it's a very funky album from that kind of early 80s sort of move towards slightly more electronic sounds. But yeah,
Sounds very Cameo-ish actually.
So, yeah, that's what I say. Yeah, very Cameo. But it has that incredible track, "Time Is Right," which is just a stone cold classic.
No, we've gone seriously out of sync.
Seriously out of sync.
Don't even know where we are anymore. Okay. I think this might have been next, but I've now lost 3 records out of my file. Yeah, well, a very strange one. This is a 12-inch single just bought at the time and never thought much about, but turns out to be one of the most valuable records of my collection now, which is slightly odd. And there's a single called "Love Line" by Sean Jackson, which was a kind of very early manifestation of Kashif, who was a producer, big-time producer in the 80s, who wrote this one as well. And this came out on the Loose End Records, which was part of MCA in the UK as well. And it's a very, very typical 80s groove, actually, but with a very nice breakdown at the end of it, actually, which is
Great
very
breakdown.
nice record.
Yeah.
I'm not sure she did anything else apart from this record.
Yeah, we're all out of sync because I think I remember playing this before John showed that, and this is the first of 2 albums that the band Salt, SAULT, released this year. Rather unexciting cover. They're very much shrouded in mystery, although all we know is that somebody called Inflow is the producer, and yeah, just really like I only really know this album, but every tune is a winner, and they sort of they sound at times like the Slits, and then suddenly they sound like Shirelle from the early 80s, and we listened to the track called Why, and yeah, do recommend investigating them. Just quite an interesting outfit, and their second album is called 7, and this first one is called 4.
What have you got
Or it
next?
could be called 5 actually.
What have you got next on your pile there?
Next in my
Okay.
pile,
Okay.
John is all over the show here.
I think you've squeezed me out, actually. This was not the next record we played, but it's the next one I'm going to have to show you, which is the Four Tops, Nature Planned It, which was one of their last albums. I think one of the last albums they made actually for Motown. I think or before, but produced by Frank Wilson, who was a kind of Norman Whitfield protege, I guess, and it's just a classic Motown track, really. Nature Planned It, great lineup. It's around the time Motown finally started putting the names of the musicians on the back of the albums as well. The great mid-tempo groove and stuff.
Well, it's amazing cover here. This is Mary Clayton and the album Gimme Shelter, and she was famously the backing vocalist on Gimme Shelter, who was dragged out, I think she was pregnant at the time, to do the backing vocals, and does her own version on this album. This is it produced? It's got a fantastic selection of session musicians: David T. Walker, Joe Sample, Billy Preston, Victor Feldman. They're all on there. Produced by Lou Adler, and yeah, great, fantastic vocals. We listened to the track "Here Comes Those Heartaches Again." Highly recommended. I think John, the 6-inch pianist, was showing another Mary Clayton album in his most recent video, but she's definitely worth checking out.
it's either one before the one after that has a great version of Neil Young's Southern Man.
The one before.
The one before.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think this was played after this at all, but we almost had an obligatory Roy Ayers slot, and this time it was the one hiding away on this album, actually, You Send Me, which is not one, I have to say, one of his absolute classic records.
No.
But it has got the great track Every Time I See You on here, which starts off fairly innocuously, but then gets more interesting as the track goes on. I mean, in a way, then nearly all these records are worth getting, actually.
Where did Franks fit into this, John?
Frank's gone completely. He
is he out?
was much earlier on, yeah.
Well, he's not going to come out.
Well, I'll show it at the end or
Okay,
something like
okay,
that.
all right.
Yeah.
Right, another obligatory selection from one of our sessions is an Isley Brothers track, and this is from the album Go For Your Guns, and it's the second track on side 2, which is called Footsteps in the Dark, parts 1 and 2, which has many important memories for John, which we won't go into right now.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of baby-making record.
Yeah.
God, I don't know what to show. What have you got in your pile next?
I've got an Ashley Beadle.
Show that next, actually. So I think
Okay.
that gets back in sync.
Right. So, Steve Winwood's first solo album had a great track called Time Is Running Out, featuring the rhythm section of Willie Weeks and Andy Newmark. And Ashley Beadle, who is a DJ producer who's just moved apparently down the road from me here in Faversham, has moved into Ramsgate, did a great remix which I've just discovered of Time Is Running Out on a 12-inch with the B-side is Conscience of My Conscience. I don't know who the original is. It seems to be a little bit boot-ish because there's no mention of Steve Winwood here, but absolutely worth listening to, and some real kind of interesting kind of dub influences towards the end of the mix.
Yeah, it's nice. Then I think I'll show this next. Actually, we're not in sequence at all. One record, not a record, but a CD I've become obsessed with is this Todd Rundgren Liars, which is just such a great. I showed it a few VCs ago actually for a track called Truth, and this time I played a track called Flow off it actually. But in terms of, actually, this is probably the record I've listened to the most, actually, over the last few months, actually. I've got possibly the worst ever cover, I think, on a record.
Gives that Temps one up.
I know, that's right. And in fact, when it was released in Japan, they refused to release it with the photo on the front of it, actually, because I thought it was so offensive. Todd pretending to be the Easter Bunny. But anyway, it's a classic record, actually. Really just full of great songs, really.
Right. I then had a Curtis Mayfield track. We played Never Stop Loving Me from the album and his Something to Believe In, which I knew mainly for the track Tripping Out, but I think it was somebody, maybe it was Lawrence played, just alerted me to this other track, which is fantastic. Just a great guitar playing and a lovely, just a beautiful production sound and a great tune. So again, very hard to go wrong with Curtis Mayfield. And I love that cover as well.
His albums were getting thinner by this time, but there was slightly fewer tracks, which were classics on there. God.
John is now just in total freestyle mode.
Yeah, we're not relating. We're completely out of sync now, totally.
Okay.
So, this wasn't the next thing we played, but it could have been. We did play it, though. This is a Kenny Burrell track album with Richard Davis, the great Richard Davis on bass and Roy Haynes on drums, live at the Village Vanguard, and just a really there's 2 or 3 kind of releases from that same night at the Village Vanguard, which are all really good, and played the track Soft Winds off there as well, which has got some beautifully crisp playing from Roy Haynes on there as well. Good stuff.
And then another track from the Vegan Record Shop. This is the soul trio called the Independents, and their greatest hits compilation called Discs of Gold. Here they are. Actually, there are 4 of them. One of whom apparently is Jesse Jackson's half-brother, I discovered. We listened to a track called Leaving Me, and just absolute sucker for vocal harmony groups, particularly from the early 70s. It sounded great.
I have to say, the idea of a vegan record shop is possibly why we've got Boris Johnson as Prime Minister.
Do you think?
No, I'm joking. But it's kind of sounds almost like a kind of caricature. Have you got any more records to play?
Well, I was going to just show that one at the end.
Oh, okay.
But I think that would go nicely with the...
Yeah. The only other thing saying, I've been trying to find a particular piece of music. I know there are not many soundtrack fans on the VC, but there's one particular piece of music right at the end of Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I've never been able to track down. And finally, there's a version of this soundtrack which has come out. And it's right before the final credits, actually, of the thing. But it's just an amazing piece of music. And the track's called Where's the Cat? So if there's any Henry Mancini fans, just listen to that. It's just astonishing. It almost sounds like Anton Webern, but then goes into Moon River afterwards as well. It's a great piece of music.
Now, John and I both bought each other Christmas presents of records that we both already had. And I bought John, because I've just bought this myself, is the Tone Poet. Is it Tone Poet? Tone something or other.
Tone Poet, yeah.
It is Tone Poet. One of the really nice Blue Note reissues of 2019. The album Etc. from Wayne Shorter. And I played the track Indian Song actually this morning, which just sounded fantastic. I think John is about to produce his version, which he already has an earlier pressing. But anyway, they're very pricey when they first came out. They seem to have, certainly in the UK, reduced in price a little bit, but highly, highly recommended. Amazing interplay between Herbie, Wayne Shorter, Cecil McVie and Joe Chambers.
And I bought Mark this, which he already has, which is Father's Children, Who's Going to Save the World, which is one of the great Numo Group releases just the way they do their stuff is so beautiful, actually. Great covers, really good notes and so forth. And just one last thing to show, because we got lost in the sequence, was I played, just because it sounds incredible, really. I haven't played Lumpy Gravy for a long time, actually. And this is from the reissue that came out a couple of years ago. And just nobody's making music like this anymore at all, actually. Music concrete plus orchestral plus doo-wop plus 50s R&B sound, all in space of about half a second, really.
Plus very strange spoken word.
Spoken word and snorkel noises. So anyway, always good for Frank. We need him.
Yes, so I guess Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a good one, as John Lennon said. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Best
Thanks
wishes
for
everybody.
all the comments and the good wishes. Keep well, everyone.
Take care.